the lesson here is
don't listen to you.
Don't listen to my advice.
You know what the internet's like, right? You Google one thing and it's like, oh, did you mean this? I'm like, well, not really, but let's read it anyway.
When I was 18, my father passed away, and he actually passed away on the day of my first ever exam in medical school. It was called an iTouch.
Was it? iPod Touch?
iPod Touch. Yeah, not iTouch, sorry. It was an iPod Touch.
That's a different thing.
Feel invincible and you never think that you're going to run into problems later on. It might save your life. And I've seen it save people's lives. Welcome to another episode from The Doctor's Mess. I'm Dr. Nitin, and this is your co-host, Dr. Alex.
That's me.
They say that she's the doctor, and I'm the mess.
That is what I say. Here we talk about all things health, wellness, and lifestyle. And today we're going to look at quite an interesting topic, actually, what I think. And that is the phrase, is healthy the new wealthy?
Everything I am, every goal I have, every dream I have, every company I founded, my dog, my girlfriend, my mum, all of it rests on this tectonic plate that I didn't even know was there called my health. You remove my health, you remove everything I have.
But if you don't have the health, if you don't have the energy to do so, what good is $1 million in your bank account and then you take your family on a 30-day trip and you're complaining all the time because your body hurts and you gotta take a nap and you just don't feel good? Health is our true wealth. And if you focus and prioritize your health, everything in your life becomes that much more efficient.
So the phrase itself actually, like many good things, dates back to Roman times, and it's attributed to a Roman poet called Virgil, who said something along the lines of, the greatest wealth is health. Years ago.
I knew it would be a poet.
All Roman, let's be clear.
Yeah.
But actually more recently, there's a quote from, well, I say recently, from 1860, there's an American philosopher called Ralph Emerson, who also said the greatest asset is health. And I think it's a really interesting topic. It's the concept of kind of longevity, the concept of, can you be truly wealthy if you don't have your health?
I think some people will immediately listen to that kind of concept and they'll think about the fact that not everybody gets dealt the same hand in life. So some people don't have the greatest health, unfortunately. They're maybe born with certain conditions that impact their health, or through their lives things come along completely unavoidable, or genetic or accidents or anything like that impact their health. But that doesn't mean that they can't live a life as full as possible. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, although somebody else might judge and say, well, your health is down, you can't do as many things as maybe somebody else could do, they could still have what they think is a very healthy, wealthy life for them. Yeah. Mm. So I think really in this episode, I think the main thing that we're going to be looking at is what people can do to look after their health for the future. Okay. And therefore to maximize the benefits for their lives.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd say the way I would look at this kind of phrase or this quote is really in terms of preventable health problems. So we're talking about things like diabetes, type 2 diabetes, talking about things like high blood pressure, heart disease, maybe things like certain cancers, which may have lifestyle factors as a risk factor. So yeah, I would definitely agree that it's very much about kind of possibly preventable health problems as opposed to, those that you might be born with or genetic or whatever.
Our audience is probably going to be a huge range of ages. Okay. But I know that when I was in my teenage years, early 20s and so on, that I didn't really think about the future and what affects how I was living my life at that point.
Well, you think you're bulletproof in your 20s.
Yeah, exactly.
You feel invincible.
Yeah. You think that nothing will ever happen to you. And really, I should have had a bit of a wake-up call, because unfortunately, when I was 18, my father passed away, and he actually passed away on the day of my first ever exam in medical school. And he had a sudden heart attack, and he was just in his early 50s. And for me, that should have been a wake-up call from that point, that I really, really needed to look after my health, that I needed to be the person that was in the gym, the person that was looking after his cardiovascular health by whether it be sort of running, cycling, whatever it might be, to keep myself as well as possible. And I'm the first person to put my hands up and say, I haven't done that. And I didn't do that, especially at that age. You feel invincible, and you never think that you're going to run into problems later on.
So there's another quote, because I'm full of the useful quotes today, but if there's another quote that says, if you don't take time for wellness, you may be forced to take time for illness. And I wondered what you think about that, kind of keeping in mind what you've just said about your dad.
I think it's a very fair quote. Ultimately, not everything that happens to us health-wise is preventable. Some things are just going to happen. They are either genetic or, as I said, accidents, or, you are always going to get something. But there is a large range of conditions that we deal with on a daily basis, that we see on a daily basis as doctors, that could at least have been partly or wholly prevented by a better lifestyle. And so when I talk about lifestyle, I am talking about those kind of things that we consider to be preventable risk factors. So the smoking, excess alcohol, not looking after your weight, not actually getting any significant exercise or exertion that sort of improves your cardiovascular health. So those are the kind of things that immediately spring to mind.
Yeah, that kind of preventable, modifiable risk factors, really. That's I guess what we're kind of getting at, isn't it? And then kind of to move on from this phrase a little bit and to kind of extrapolate it a little bit further, there's one school of thought that says actually it relates to investing in your health. And I know that you are a lover of the stocks and the stock market, and is it Yahoo Finance or no, Seeking Alpha? That's your...
Yeah, Yahoo Finance, Seeking Alpha. I'm a sad man. These are my favorite websites, right? But essentially, when you look to buy a stock, okay, you are, or you will generally, unless your mate Tim down the pub gave you a tip, most of the time you'll take a look at a company and you will have a look at the history, what it's done so far, what its potential is for the future, and try and work out how things are going to go. And so you'll look at a range of factors, how much money do they make, how much profit is there on everything that they sell, and is there any chance for that market to grow in the future? And by kind of analyzing that, you take a look at something now. So you take a look at the company now, and you are trying to work out how it's going to do in 10 years. Okay. So, if we take one of my favorite examples, you take Greg's stock, right? So back in the day, Greg's appeared, the food was brilliant. Okay. And, really, if you looked at that and you thought, this stuff is really good, it's really cheap, this thing is going to absolutely fly. Okay. And over the years, Greg's shares have done incredibly. You could have predicted this years ago. Okay. Because you could see that the ingredients were there for it to do really well. And we can apply the same thinking. When somebody walks into my room as a GP, I can look at them and say, they have these things in place, and statistically, they're either going to do well or they're not going to do well. So if I get maybe unfortunately someone who is significantly overweight and they're age 25, okay, and if you look and say maybe one of their parents was diabetic, I will sit there and I will immediately think the chances are this person is, if they stay overweight, is probably going to get diabetes at a young age. Along with that, they'll get hypertension, high blood pressure, okay, and unless they lose significant weight, then there's every chance that they'll get joint troubles at a young age. So I can see what they are now and how those risk factors look, and kind of make a prediction in my head as to what's going to happen to them in the future. And then it's kind of my responsibility to try and explain to them that that's what I can see. I can see that happening in the future. I'm not a prophet, okay? You know, it's all statistics, yeah? So you will always get, you know, I might see somebody who smokes from the age of 20 and they might smoke to the age of 95 and do absolutely fine, okay? And you'll always get that person who smokes for 5 years and gets lung cancer at 25. But so it's all statistics. It's about what are the odds of something happening, and things like smoking make it more likely for certain health conditions, and things like obesity make it more likely for certain health conditions.
So I've been sat here quietly listening to you talk about this investment mindset, okay? But I distinctly remember conversations, well, I'd say conversations, they were more one-sided lectures that I was given about investments. And I followed your advice and I invested in the companies you told me to invest in. And that was, 4 years ago? And I'm still in the red.
You're still in the negative, yeah. Okay. So look, the lesson here is
don't listen to you.
Don't listen to my advice on stocks, okay? I am calamitous. If I buy it, it will fall apart, okay? But one thing that I am decent at is working out those same kind of things with
because
people.
Actually you were also just talking about the Greg's stocks share price,
but
you don't have any Greg's.
I didn't buy any.
But I think it's an interesting thing. I think you're quite right that when you start looking at making an investment, and if we use that kind of investment term to mean, you know, some kind of monetary transaction to invest in something, yet you do research, right? You might take some expert advice, you might take some guidance and try and come to an informed decision about the investment in its entirety. And I think you can apply that quite simply to your own healthcare in the sense of you gather some information, you might take some expert advice, maybe from your GP or another doctor, and think about kind of what are the risks of doing something, what are the risks of not doing something, and then make a plan to move forward.
So this is a bit of a lower brow quote than your quotes that you've come up with. But
is it from yourself?
It's not actually.
It usually is.
But it is from a lady that I used to watch on television.
Okay.
I'm sure you already know.
I do.
Yeah. So a TV presenter in America called Joan Rivers. She was 85.
81. I did double check earlier.
81. Okay. But used to look like she was about 41.
Well, her face was 41.
Face was 41. Yeah. And her most famous quote was that any money that you spend on yourself, on your health, is never wasted. And I thought it was quite an impactful quote to me, because I'd never really thought of it like that. You know, we spend money on lots of different things in life, okay? Things that make us happy. And I'd never thought that actually investing in your health, investing in your mental health, these things are never wasted. It doesn't mean that they'll always go perfectly, but ultimately, it's never going to be a bad place to spend your money.
I actually was reading, because I am a little bit of a nerd, but there was a white paper from the Royal Society of the Arts, and it was about the UK in the post kind of pandemic world, and it talked a lot about our health and talking about our health as our greatest asset, both in terms of on a personal level, but also on a kind of society level. And that when our health lacks resilience or when it's not functioning well, that greatly impacts us as a person and as a society at large.
We're all spending our lives sort of making plans, rumbling along. I'm going to do this in my career. I'm going to get married. I'm going to go on this holiday. But when your health goes wrong, all of those things come to a standstill. Okay.
I think very simply, if you were to look at it really on a very basic level, imagine you had billions of pounds, right? But you had really significant health problems. So you couldn't really go out, or you weren't very mobile, or you had a shortened life expectancy, or something that limited your ability to live. Yes, you may have money in the bank, but what can you do with it?
I mean, ultimately, one of the perfect examples of that was Steve Jobs. He had had an incredibly successful career with some incredible ups and downs, but he is the man that essentially led to the phone that you're probably watching this on. Yeah, definitely my phone, even though it's 4 years old. But
you didn't never had an Apple product until you met me, though.
no, I never knew the joys of Apple. And then one day I bought an iPod Touch,
Yes.
and I realized that the future is here.
Oh, so you'd had an Apple product,
Yeah,
but you hadn't had Mac or iPhone.
no, nothing else. I had an
Okay.
Apple. It was called an iTouch.
Was it?
Yeah.
iPod Touch.
iPod Touch.
Yeah. I don't remember. I don't.
Yeah, not iTouch. Sorry, it was an iPod Touch.
That's a different thing. I had the little iPod Nano,
Yeah,
and I had a little Shuffle.
and so all of those products ultimately came from him. Okay, and obviously he had a massive team, but they were his brainchild.
Do you remember the adverts from Johnny Ive? Honestly, that man could have dressed up a bin bag and talked about it.
I would have bought
would
bin
have
bags
bought-
from that
I would have
man.
bought so many bin bags. His voice was it was incredible.
We have created a product that is the most deliberate evolution of our original founding design.
I think I bought my first iPhone, because I was listening to him talk about how incredible it was going to be.
The curves and the screen
Yeah.
and the display.
And so the thing with Steve Jobs was that it was actually 2003, so way before the iPhone came out, that he had already been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And he continued to get through from 2003 until 2011. So although he had a significant health condition that he was fighting that whole time, he still lived a really good life.
I mean, you have to say, actually, if I think about patients that we've known with pancreatic cancer, that's an incredible run when you think about it. 2003 to 2011.
So ultimately, he was cut off in his prime, and that was his health. And that's the thing. You can rumble along through life, and then your health can just completely change everything.
What can we practically do if we think about it on a personal level for our health, and if we're thinking about investing in our health?
So I think the first thing to do is always to look at those kind of modifiable risk factors that I mentioned. So we've got to look at things like avoiding smoking, being reasonable with alcohol, sticking to kind of the government recommended limits, and then looking at your own levels of exercise and looking after your own weight. And if we can do that, and that is a lot, that's not, it sounds really easy, but lots of us struggle with one or more of those. So if we can do that, keep ourselves at a good weight, do a decent amount of exercise each week, stay active and alert, we're already doing a good job.
Sometimes I feel when I'm talking to patients and, we give this kind of advice about needing to kind of improve our activity levels or increase our activity levels, reducing our weight or modifying our diet or cutting down on drinking, things like that. Sometimes I feel like they sound really trivial, and I feel like some patients are waiting for me to come up with some kind of quite fancy answer to how we can kind of move things forward. But the reality is, although they may sound basic, as you said, a vast majority of us could improve at least one of those. I know certainly I definitely could. So I think although they may sound trivial, they're really not.
Yeah, I think it's when they look at populations as a whole. So I think it was around about 20 years ago, the government said to GPs that you really need to get on top of the blood pressure of the population. And they made it part of their contract to actually do something about it. And so GPs would actually have to go through their patients, and those patients whose blood pressures were not doing very well, not well controlled, they had to actively work at getting those blood pressures down with those patients. And what we saw was that by doing this, there was a really significant decrease in the number of people suffering heart attacks and strokes. So it may not have helped each individual person, but on a population level, it statistically caused a really significant decrease in that kind of thing.
I actually saw a really interesting video on YouTube that kind of talks a little bit about this only a couple of days ago. And it was, Dr. Mike.
Oh, yeah.
So Dr. Mike...
He's the doctor that makes the rest of us all look bad.
Yes. But so he was interviewing someone, I think he's a psychiatrist, and he's also, is it Ayurvedic?
Yeah, you've absolutely butchered the name.
I think so. What's it called?
Ayurvedic.
Okay.
I've also butchered the name, but I was closer.
Okay. But anyway, so he was also a practitioner of that school of medicine. And I don't know much about it at all. If I'm really honest, I'm very much kind of based in Western medicine, and I do know that there are other schools of medicine out there, but I just don't have experience of them. But he was explaining it very much about, in Western medicine, we do tend to start population first. So we treat things based on what we know is good generally as a whole for a vast majority of people, but it may not have impact, as you said, it may not have an impact on an individual, but at a larger scale, it will have an impact. Whereas this particular school of medicine actually starts person first and then tries to use that to extrapolate to a population. But I just thought it was a really interesting, because I don't know very much about it, I just thought it was a really interesting way of thinking about things and starting person first versus population first.
Yeah. Just to hammer home the statistics point. So there are these medicines that we prescribe to patients called statins, and they help to get your cholesterol down. And the way to think of cholesterol is your body is just a series of pipes. So it's a pump, your heart, and a series of pipes. Okay. And obviously blood flows through the pipes.
Like a closed pressure plumbing system.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know anything about
DIY
or plumbing or anything. Okay. But I understand this. Okay. So cholesterol is like blobs of fat floating through the pipes. And the more blobs there are, the more likely they're going to block a pipe. Okay. So the idea of using medicines or modifying your other risk factors, like losing weight and so on, to get your cholesterol down, is that there are fewer blobs, pipes less likely to get blocked, you're less likely to have health conditions such as heart attacks and strokes. But if I give a medication to a patient, then I have to explain to them that if I give this statin to 84 patients every day for the rest of their lives, how many do you think will actually benefit? It's actually only one. Only one person will be saved from having a heart attack or a stroke by taking that tablet. 84 people will have to take it.
So that's something that we call number needed to treat.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And that is the reason we have to look at things on a population basis rather than an individual.
And actually, just thinking about cholesterol, as you said that, I remember when I was training, when I was in med school, the cholesterol targets were one thing. And I can vividly remember, as I've gone through my career, cholesterol targets have got tighter and tighter and tighter.
And again, that's down to statistics. So they've shown that the lower you can get it for a population, the lower the chances of those things I've talked about, the lower the chances of blocking the pipes.
So you've talked about kind of the modifiable risk factors that we can perhaps look at, or you can look at with your doctor, and to see what can be done to try and minimize your chances of having problems later in life. But I think it's also really important to look at the kind of the screening programs that we have in the UK currently, and then perhaps think about what else we could add to them. So currently we have cervical screening, so smears. We have breast cancer screening. We have bowel screening. Some patients will go through abdominal aortic aneurysm screening. But there aren't a huge amount of general health screening programs, are there?
No, but I always encourage people to make sure that they actually partake
in those screening programs.
So very sadly, we see people that haven't had their smears. They've missed it for a few years, and especially after COVID, with everything being disrupted, there will definitely still be people now who are overdue their smears. We know that a really large number of people that get sent the bowel testing kits. And I think it's sort of from mid-50s or something like that, that they start receiving them. And because the concept of, taking a stool sample and sending off in the post, it's not the best moment of your life, right? It's not the best moment of your day, right? It might put you off your cornflakes, but still, it might save your life. And I've seen it save people's lives.
Yeah.
So these are the things that are available in the UK, and I really encourage people to actually take them up.
With my NHS hat on, I find sometimes in clinic patients will come and ask for an MOT or a general health check, but it can be frustrating because that's not really a framework we have in the UK. Yes, we can do some basic checks, so things like your blood pressure, your height, your weight, your BMI, maybe some checks on things like your cholesterol or sugar levels. But we tend to have to do that in the framework of a normal 10-minute GP appointment.
Yeah, exactly. The NHS will definitely be able to do some aspects of that, okay? But I think, very sadly, there is no generalised programme in the UK to offer people a really full comprehensive check. And really, what do I think would be a full comprehensive check? It would really to be sit down with a doctor every year for an hour, run through your full health, have a full examination, pretty much kind of head to toe, all the things that we can reasonably check. The number of things that we could pick up just by looking at or having that time to look at your hair, your nails, have a feel of your tummy, a listen to your chest, a listen to your heart.
I always think even simple things like looking at someone's skin, having a good chance to look at someone's skin to try and catch any nasties before they start to develop.
Exactly. We're seeing rising rates of skin cancer. And even if a doctor had a specified time every year to just have a look at all the different, we all have little moles here and there, or different types of skin lesions, and just have a little run through those and make sure that they're all looking okay. And if not, obviously get them checked out. But we don't have this kind of thing in the UK where a doctor will have an hour with each patient every year to run through those things, arrange all the relevant blood tests, make sure somebody gets an ECG, a chest x-ray for those specific people that might need it. We don't have that. But it does exist in other countries, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to kind of circle back a little bit, I think that's one of the things that actually pushed me into opening our private practice. And that is when I'm in the NHS, I feel very much like a firefighter. I'm very much practicing reactive healthcare. I'm dealing with the situation in front of me. We're trying to improve the situation, and then we'll see where we get to. But when you're in private practice, perhaps with a little bit more time, you can definitely start to shift from that kind of reactive healthcare to more preventative or proactive healthcare and start really kind of digging through those risk factors. But to your point about sort of screening or health screenings in other countries, there are some countries with really well developed, really well executed annual health screening programs. And the one that comes to mind is Japan. So in Japan, they have an annual health screening program. And actually in larger companies, it's fully handled by the company. It's covered payment-wise by the company. The company will arrange your appointment. They'll give you the time off for your appointment. And it's part of their mandatory duty to you as an employee that they provide you that as for your health. And there are basic health checks that they do, but I was watching a video on YouTube about a comprehensive health check, and I think it came in at about $200 out of pocket. And I was shocked at what the patients were being offered for that. So sorry. So each person is paying $200 if they have this extended healthcare. If you have the basic health check, it's free.
Okay, and what do they get for $200?
So they have a full history. They have a full physical examination, as you said, top to toe. Urine sample, stool sample, blood tests. They have a chest x-ray. They have an ECG. They have lung function tests. They have an endoscopy.
Wow.
It's just, they have I'm pretty sure they had an abdominal ultrasound. They also had something we call ABPIs, So blood pressures in all 4 limbs.
Sort of checking the blood flow to your legs and things like that.
And then sitting down with the doctor and then going through all those results, I was staggered at what
I mean,
was offered.
that's incredible, because to get a scope, we call it an OGD, somebody to have a look down into your stomach to make sure you haven't got anything like stomach ulcers or anything bleeding or anything like that. That used to be a few £100s in the UK, but sadly over time it's gone up significantly, and it's sort of, I think it's more like £2,000 now. So to have that and the rest of the whole health check for $200 is incredible.
So I was looking into a bit more about why Japan have this kind of health screening program, and I am actually quite interested in how other healthcare systems work. Having kind of grown up in the UK, having lived all my life under an NHS system, and yes, now I do work privately, but that's still privately within the NHS as a kind of running concurrently to that. So the concept of other healthcare systems definitely interests me quite a lot. And I found that in Japan, the government set the companies a target to reduce their employees' weight, because the percentage of employees who were overweight was increasing. And if companies did not achieve a target, the company was fined.
Wow.
So, and when we talk about kind of the obesity rates and the overweight rates in Japan, their obesity rates have been fairly static at around 3%. 3%.
I think we're about 30-something percent here.
Yeah. Now, their obesity rates are fairly static. That unfortunately, their rates of people who are overweight, so that BMI between 25 to 30, is increasing, and does seem to be increasing kind of proportionally in terms of younger patients are more overweight. And so, there is potentially change ahead for them. But
so this again comes back to the investment mindset, the investment concept. They are investing now in looking after their population so that they will have fewer costs for the population as a whole in the future, because the population is going to be less likely to develop health issues.
Yeah, because Japan and like other countries like Korea are in a very difficult situation. They have quite a rapidly declining birth rate. So the population is growing older and older and older, which we know as we age, health problems are more common. So if you need to make real executive steps to try and prevent certain health conditions from developing.
I think overall that will save them a fortune, but more importantly, it will actually mean that people live a better quality of life with fewer health issues.
And I think I started to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole once you know what the internet's like, right? You Google one thing and it's like, oh, did you mean this? I'm like, well, not really, but let's read it anyway. And even things like in Japan, so they still have fast food restaurants, okay? They still have KFC, McDonald's, all those sorts of things. But on average, even their fast food restaurants contain 25% less calories than in the West. The portion sizes are significantly smaller. So it's a very cultural thing as to perhaps why their obesity rates are lower. But I think this all stems from vast government investment in the population health.
So you're telling me that Japanese McDonald's is a rip-off?
You watch Food Wars, right?
Is everything the size of a Happy Meal?
No, there's a YouTube channel called Food. Is it a channel or is it the
Food
series?
Wars. Yeah, Food Wars.
And do you remember there's episodes where they compare Japanese restaurants to American restaurants?
Yeah, they compare different chains in different countries and the different sort of sizes and not so much cost, but the different sizes of products. And I think they always end up demonstrating that an American small is bigger than everybody else's large.
I don't think that's quite the case, but yeah, it's certainly on that level. I do love Food Wars.
From calorie count to portion sizes, we wanted to find out all the differences between McDonald's in Japan and the US. This is Food Wars.
So in Japan, our McDonald's sodas come in 3 sizes. This is small, and this is Japan's medium,
medium,
and this one is Japan's large. In Japan, our chicken McNuggets come in 5 and 15 pieces.
Our chicken McNuggets come in 4, 6, 10, 20, or 40 piece. Look at all those nuggets.
So I was saying that the Japanese, I think they'll save a really large amount of money in the future by investing now, because I was looking at how much healthcare costs these days, how much the NHS is spending on things.
Oh, it's crazy. So you've heard of the King's Fund. It's like a think tank in the UK.
Yeah.
And they released some figures last year. And they were looking at things like the cost of healthcare and what savings could be made, but also what investment could achieve. And in England alone, so if you're from out of the UK, what you might not realise is that healthcare is devolved across the UK. So we have NHS England, we have NHS Wales, NHS Scotland, etc., etc. To run the NHS alone in England, £1 billion will last the NHS 2.5 days. That's
that's mind blowing.
Huge sum of money. The average inpatient stay overnight, one night, is around £500, and that's without anything complicated. That's without any kind of higher dependency unit.
I mean, that's more expensive than the Ritz.
I don't know about that, but it's pretty pricey. And then your average sort of specialist outpatient is around £200. But do you know what the average cost is to see your GP?
Isn't it about a tenner?
£30.
Wow.
Think about how much we have to achieve for that kind of fund, each GP visit. And so there's a website called Go Compare, which you may know from the adverts.
Is it the irritating singing guy?
Yeah. But they have a website which they call the Bill of Health, and they use these figures from NHS England. And it's a fairly crude calculator, but you can click on various bits and pieces and you can work out how much your health has cost the NHS. So, for example, it could be, if you've had a hernia removed, or it could be that you've had to call an ambulance or attend an A&E, or it could be all those sorts of things. And the costs really, really stack up super quickly.
I think people have no idea how much all of these things actually cost. And I know that when we've been abroad, and if we've ever needed health over there, then fortunately it's normally covered by insurance, but you do get the hospital bill and you can see exactly how much everything costs. And it's absolutely astronomical.
I think one of the things that I find patients are often shocked by are the cost of inhalers. So inhalers for asthma and things like that, often people might want more than one reliever inhaler, or they lose an inhaler. But actually the cost of that inhaler is not insignificant. And if you're losing them all the time, because in the NHS we get, in the UK, we generally get reduced cost, or in some parts of the UK, free prescriptions. But if you were paying every time you lost an inhaler, I don't think you'd lose the inhaler.
I mean, I think inhalers are anywhere from £20 for the cheapest, all the way up to sort of £80 for some of the more expensive ones. And people are on some of these inhalers that might be £60 a month forever.
Lifelong, right?
Yeah.
So we've talked about health screening programs, say, for example, the ones they have in Japan, and also how, unfortunately, at the moment anyway, that's not something necessarily embedded within the NHS, but it is definitely something that can be accommodated privately. But you're quite fit and well in your health. If you were going to book an annual health screen or a health screen, what would be important to you? What would you get checked?
So I'd want to start with some time with a doctor, okay, to really just go through things, go through all the basic things, general statistics, height, blood pressure, weight, all that kind of stuff. And then a full physical examination to get properly checked out. We never get properly checked out. And then I would want some blood tests. So I would probably want things like a blood count, an HbA1c, which is a marker for diabetes, because I've got a strong family history of diabetes. Then I'd want a PSA, which is a prostate test. Okay. I'd want to get my cholesterol done. And then along with those kind of things, then we would always do things like your liver test, your kidney test, that kind of thing. Okay. So essentially make sure that all your kind of organs are working the way that they're meant to. And then I would probably want a couple of things that we kind of less commonly do. Things like vitamin D and, vitamin B12 and things like that. Because my vitamin D is always a disaster.
Actually, we checked our vitamin D, didn't we, not too long ago, and they were
both hopeless.
They were terrible.
Yeah. And I think it's probably because we're working during the day, we're inside. And so especially through the winters when,
there's north of the wall.
Yeah, there's not that much light anyway. So, you just don't get the light exposure that helps your body to produce vitamin D.
How about so you've talked about blood tests and also in terms of time with the doctor and things like that. How about kind of any other more specific tests? So in terms of ECG or lung function?
I think for me, I've never smoked. Okay, but I did mention that I've got a family history of a heart attack, and so I really wouldn't mind getting an ECG done on a yearly basis, just for reassurance, if nothing else.
And how about lung function tests? So
lung function tests, perfectly reasonable thing to do for a lot of people. A lot of people have a history of asthma, or they might have a history of smoking, and that'd be something I'd be perfectly happy to do. Again, it takes no time, and I would feel that everything had kind of been properly checked out.
And I think for me, if I was looking at getting a health screening done, I think, I would completely agree with you in terms of the bits and pieces that you are talking about. I'd probably add in maybe a thyroid function as well. I think that can be a useful kind of thing to monitor.
And I hadn't mentioned male and so obviously male hormone tests for me and female hormone tests.
Yeah, absolutely. So we know that unfortunately as men get older, but we're not even talking about starting at a later age in life. We know even in their 40s, there are a significant portion of men who have a lower level of testosterone. So getting your testosterone checked on a regular basis is not a bad thing.
And I think also these days we're recognizing more and more with women that people that maybe previously were thought to be too young to be menopausal are actually getting properly checked now. And people are finding more, not often, but definitely from time to time, that women have low estrogen levels even in their 30s. And we call it premature ovarian failure. And it can be a source of significant sort of health issues.
So kind of linking back to some of the things we talked about earlier and looking at steps that we can take to try and preserve our health in as best a possible shape as we can for as long as we possibly can. I last year sometime, read a study about how to preserve cognitive function. And there were a couple of strategies that it was suggested that could actually help kind of maintain your cognitive function later in life. One was learning an instrument. So I bought a piano. We played it twice and never played it again. It's now collecting dust.
But it's good for putting things on.
Oh, it's great storage. And the other thing was they talked about learning languages. So that's something that I've definitely tried to do over the last, it's been about a year now, hasn't it? So I have been trying to learn Korean. And I mean, I remember learning languages in school and I'd worked through little textbooks. We had one called Tricolore in French. But Korean's really hard. I think I've barely surpassed kind of basic greetings.
Yeah, I'm still struggling with English. Okay. But I definitely get your point, because I've read studies that show that there are multiple, everyone is worried these days about dementia. Okay. And they have shown that, yes, there are multiple different types of dementia. So what I'm about to say doesn't necessarily apply to all of them. Okay. But the more active you are mentally, kind of the more reserve capacity you have. So if we think about, if I try and explain it in terms of lungs, right? So you have two lungs, okay? And you can actually survive on one lung. You can carry on living your life, very reasonably. Maybe you're not going to be winning the 100 meters in the Olympics, but you can do very well and get through most of life on one lung. So you can immediately understand that you've kind of got, at the very minimum, a 50% reserve capacity, which means you can do without 50% of what you've got. And the same kind of concept works for your brain in that, yes, your brain, all of our brains get worse over time as we get older, okay? But there is a certain level at which you can still function really well. And I think the concept is that the more you do, the more you exercise your mind to increase its capacity, even if you then lose some of that capacity as you get older, you can still function better.
So I read those studies, and having failed miserably at learning the piano, my musical talents do generally extend to the triangle. I went down the language learning route, and that's why I chose Korean, which has nothing to do with K-drama or BTS.
Or marrying BTS.
I mean, I am already married, so that's tricky. And they're a bit too young for me anyway.
That's not a no though, right?
I mean, it's not a no. Never say never. Do you know what I mean? Actually, it's almost 2 years to the day when and this truly was a demonstration of your affection for me, because I said to you, husband, do you want to fly to Las Vegas and watch BTS?
Oh yes, I can't wait.
Well, I think you were like, who's that? But and then you were like, sure, let's go. And it was very funny to watch you in the middle of Allegiant Stadium, surrounded by army with their light bombs. I even bought you a light bomb and you refused to turn it on. I mean, that's just sacrilege.
I did wave it a little bit.
You are secret army.
So with your new knowledge of Korean, have you been watching anything recently?
So I am definitely a avid watcher of K-drama, but I'm also a binge watcher. So a lot of K-dramas will be released sort of 2 episodes a week, and that will continue for the duration of the series. And I hate it. I hate watching the first 2 episodes of a drama, feeling really into it, and then having to wait a whole week. So I try to ignore all the kind of reviews and not watch it until it's come to the end. So I can kind of sit and really binge watch it over a weekend, for example. And I'm just about to start a new drama called Queen of Tears on Netflix.
나 사실은 무서웠어.
왜? 너 줄 누가 보는지 몰라?
근데 3년 전에는 너네 했던 거 아니야?
사랑.
같이 있는다고 나랑? 그냥 계속 당신이랑 집에 가고 싶다는 생각을 했어.
혜인이가 어떻게 되든 말든 괜찮을 자신이 있었다고. 근데 그게 잘 안 된다고.
And it's been, I think it's the second most popular K-drama after Crash Landing on You of all time. So I am so excited, like beyond excited to watch it.
I'm going to be forced to watch this, aren't I? I can sense this already.
Well, see, the thing is, you say that, but there are many K-dramas that we've watched together that you really enjoyed.
Yeah, some of them quite good, to be honest.
You really liked Vincenzo.
Vincenzo was brilliant.
It was pretty good. So that's my upcoming plan, is to watch Queen of Tears. You may or may not join me. That's entirely up to you. But what about you? Have you been watching anything or doing anything fun recently?
Well, I think these days I get a weekly dose of comedy on a Sunday afternoon, usually as Manchester United play, which really is, quite frankly...
That was quite a big sigh.
It really is quite depressing. So when I was growing up, we had years and years. So yeah, obviously I'm a Manchester United fan. And previously I could reasonably have considered to be a Glory supporter. And now I think I'm chasing the deep, dark depths of depression. Okay. And every week they hand a new dose of this stuff out.
A new dose of depression.
A new dose of depression because it's so bad.
Mm-hmm.
But now to the point that it's funny. Yeah. Okay. We now the sort of friends that I have and the family that I have that are also United fans. We're just in a like a text group, and it's just
laughably bad.
Yeah, exactly. It's just laughably bad. So
I must admit, like, obviously over the years we've been together, I think my ability to track how bad things have got it's just dropped off, because I kind of know the answer. And it actually gets to the point now, sometimes if we're having dinner on a Sunday, you'll leave the game on the TV, but you're just like, someone else scored again. Someone else scored again. And it is, it's definitely been bad. I think we went to watch a game. Was it a Spurs game?
Yeah, you took me to a game last season, and it just reminded me, first of all, how bad the stadium is.
I mean, it's not great for tall people.
Yeah, I think you have to be like a yoga master to fit in those seats these days. And I don't eat the food.
You do like a bovril.
Who doesn't love a bovril?
Me.
Yeah, a bovril was one of those drinks that was always on the hospital trolley.
It's not even a drink, isn't it? Like a gravy.
I think it's basically just salt and water, but it got me through many a night shift.
Where exactly are Man U in the table? Dare I ask? Is that a too painful question?
I still check the top half of the table first.
Okay.
And we are.
Did you just scroll down?
You do have to scroll these days.
Okay.
Yeah, you never used to have to scroll ever. But I think we're going to finish about 6th.
Okay. I mean, it's not the worst. Let's be positive. It's not, relegation.
No, it's a total tragedy for us.
Well, on that somewhat depressing note, shall we say goodbye and see people next time?
Yeah, thank you all for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.
See you in the next one.